Well, all right, Brian. The Major League Baseball playoffs are well in effect. The Mets and Cubs in the NLCS, the Royals and the Blue Jays in the ALCS. The division series were spectacular in many ways. And of course, that has a lot of people doing what I'm doing, which is playing MLB 15 the show on the PlayStation 4. Obviously, it's on the PS3 and the Vita as well. And there's been some conversation about the postseason coverage in MLB 15 the show. And, I'm going to say, we spoke about it a little bit on last week's episode of the Press Row podcast, but I was, I think, probably on the more positive side of the presentation of the postseason. And I went back in and I continued playing my division series on, in my Met season. And I'm going to say I'm actually more impressed than I was even a few days ago with what the show does for the postseason in two ways. Number one is the division series. They have some really nice graphics at the opening. They have some beautiful. They have the bunting out in the field. They got the fans waving the towels. They have the NLDS logo on the side. And I played in a big Game 5, deciding Game 5 at home in New York, and battled all the way through and wound up winning the game. And afterwards, the team came out and celebrated. All of this rambling, Brian Weedeye, is me saying, you know what? I think they do a great job in MLB 15 the show of doing the postseason better than I even thought. How do you feel about it?
Well, yeah, they've done a really excellent job in, first of all, creating a postseason mode, and that's you're not using that right now. You actually played through a whole season, but creating a postseason mode where you can customize the teams you want in, even if you want to mess with the leagues and everything, so that more people can experience that. Because there's a lot of people who start up a franchise and never even make it to the postseason. There's a lot of people who just play online or just play Diamond Dynasty, whatever it may be. So they've done a lot of work in that area because a lot of people are exposed to it, more people maybe so than in other games. And so the crowd is an excellent part of it, I think, and bringing the towels back this year because they had been stripped out the previous year. That's actually matters a lot, and they're on their feet more, and they get louder for 2 strikes and all things like that. But it's still lacking in a lot of ways as we watch these games in like these individual moments that are missing from the video game that you see in the actual games. These individual moments, the emotion, the unpredictable nature of sport coming through that the video game doesn't really try to attempt and replicate. And then there's other things like the commentary that falls flat a little bit in the postseason games, and I'm sure we'll get into all that more. But what the great thing that it does is you feel a difference and do see a difference between just regular season games and postseason games in the show.
I agree. And another thing that is really amazing, and I was dabbling in it the last couple of nights, is the MLB Today or MLB Live. I always get confused as to what that's called, but there's a mode where you can go play today's games. And I went in during Game 1 and Game 2 of the NLCS, and they have the entire NLCS. The graphic overlay. They have the player introductions. They got it on the field. They talk about how it's the NLCS, like in the commentary. They have the up to the second rosters, right? The right pitching matchup. Like that is some seriously excellent stuff. Again, I don't think enough people realize this, and B, I certainly don't see or hear anybody talking about this, and it's really amazing stuff.
Yeah, and that's basically taking just a play now type game and adding those elements to it and getting you wrapped up in the moments that are taking place each day throughout the postseason. But also you can play those games throughout the regular season, and they try to get the lineups and the pitching matchups right. And they struggle with that a little more in the regular season, but there's a great time for them to take advantage of it and really put those games on display. And again, exposing more people to that postseason atmosphere and experience that they've built in there.
So you asked some folks what they had to say about MLB The Show. So let's the specific question you asked was, what should the show do to better replicate the MLB postseason experience? So I'm going to go through a few of these.
And we're going to see some themes here.
Yes.
There's really three big themes that all wrap up into what people want to see in the postseason. That's to take things to another level. And so as we go through these, you'll probably see those develop, and we'll talk about them later.
So let's see here. Skyflame21 says it'd be nice to have real broadcast teams and overlays from Fox and TBS. Definitely adds more authenticity. It's hard to argue that. Of course, the practicalities of that are quite a bit different. Dan Wasserman, DMW36, says new broadcasters, please. So, there's one of your themes developing right there. Mm-hmm. That's more of to me, feels like more of just a global MLB show thing.
Yeah.
Specifics. Hector Russell says Matt V needs to say Santa Maria when I hit a big time go homer. Steve Lyons' personality needs to come out in the game too. So there's 3 commentaries in a row. Let's see here. Blue Hefner says more player emotion, a better owner mode to allow me to control all aspects of my team, i.e. stadium. So again, that's a little bit more of a global. Although the player emotion, I can definitely see that as specifically to the postseason. EAMMON says different new emotional animations. So there's your theme right there. Let's see. Up next, we've got JMU 2012 says a better engine for emotional reactions. Again, hitting on the emotion of the playoffs. Let's see here. So up next, we've got Jay Sherm, our good friend Jay Sherm 23 says, has more umpire variability, erratic calls influenced by the home crowd or game momentum. Now, what's interesting about that, and we'll get into, is now you've got replay. So that erratic calls would lead to replays, which I can't stand. But I mean, I guess ultimately it's a good thing.
Unless is he talking more about the strike zone?
Could be, and we've certainly seen. We're recording this right after Game 3 of the NLCS. We've certainly seen some questionable strike zones through the playoffs. There's no doubt about that. Cheddar7 says, add the extra umpires to the crew that the MLB adds to the postseason. So that's interesting because you've got 6 umpires in the playoffs, including one in the right field and one on the left field. So that's a good call right there. Snowcone Jones wants to improve the stadium atmosphere. Now, again, I mean, I'm down with the stadium atmosphere in the playoffs. You'll even notice, like, when there's a big play, the crowd will rise up and, stand up and start waving the towels. But, if it's, there's a couple bad things have happened in a row, they'll sort of sit down and they'll be a little, So I even noticed that. That was interesting. So, all right. So let's see here. Up next, we got Brad. Our good friend Brad W says, fix the starter fatigue and account for off days, allow you to have 4-man rotations with regular rest. Now that's interesting. I think we'll talk about that a little bit. The whole, particularly in these elimination games, when these when the managers really manage the game very differently than any other regular season game, that definitely comes into it. Our good friend TJ Lyman, never heard of him. That Sports Gamer says fix pitcher stamina.
And that was the issue with this year. There were essentially in the playoffs, there were no off days. So you ended up with having to wait 5 days to get your pitcher back and ready to go or 5 games, that is, instead of just needing a few days because of the off days, the travel days in there that they don't take into account.
That's a good point. Christopher Watson says, have historic playoff statistics during overlays and on the ticker. That's pretty good.
And in addition to that, how about we have correct regular season stats that show up? Usually it's just 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0.
Yeah, that is weird, and it's been a consistent problem for a couple of years. We've seen in our online franchise and in the playoffs that I'm seeing is that just the regular season stats are not right at all. So let's see a couple more. C. John Chavis wants to have fans throw trash on the field. So like up in Toronto when they disagreed with the call, a bunch of bad stuff happened.
Yeah, that's a Blue Jays feature.
Yeah, I'm not sure MLB would sign off on
that. No.
Our guy, Peruvian Idol, says more FanDuel and Viagra ads because, oh my gosh, Lord knows they are everywhere.
It's authenticity, Rich. We're looking for authenticity here. Then you got to have those.
So let's talk about the
Yeah.
themes, right? So there are a number of themes. I think the first, the first main theme is emotion, and we do see a lot of emotion in these games. You know, players that are, I think, a little more mild mannered, like David Wright, for example. Gets
Mm-hmm.
really excited. Danny Murphy has been hitting home runs all over the place, really, kind of pumped up and yelling and stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, there, and obviously, I mean, you talk about emotion. What about that series between the Rangers and the Blue Jays? I mean, emotions were
Yeah.
on in full effect there. So talk to me a little bit about that theme and what you do see and what you would like to see more of.
Yeah, and that was one of kind of the selling points of MLB 15, the show, was that there would be more player emotion, but we rarely saw that. You might see a fist pump from a pitcher or something, but really everything was still kept in check, and everybody was kind of mild-mannered about everything. It was no big deal, and I think that's what is really lacking from these playoff games is the sense of urgency, and this goes across the board. The sense of urgency with the players, with cuts to the dugout with the managers or the commentary team. You don't get that sense of urgency where, boy, every pitch here is a huge deal. That you feel it when you're watching these games on TV. You don't really get that sense when you're playing them. So when someone hits a big home run, you want to see that come through. When someone gets a big strikeout, you want to see that come through. And when those moments are just tense, when there are guys on base or they're trying to close the game out in the ninth, really have to ramp that stuff up. And that's what we're missing, I think, right now as we watch these games. You really see that stuff come out from every player, from the fans, from the commentary team, from the managers, from the base coaches. You can see the pressure and the urgency with everyone, and you don't get that sense in the game. You just know that it's an important game, but that doesn't really raise that level of urgency on a pitch-to-pitch basis like it should.
Yeah, I agree somewhat, but I also, again, I want to give credit where credit's due. So, like in that game 5, I was up by a run. Lucas Duda hit a big home run in like the 6th inning to put my Mets up 3-2, and then I had to really walk a real tightrope to close out the Dodgers. I'm sorry, I was playing the Padres actually in the 7th, 8th, and 9th, and in fact, I brought in my closer. In the 9th, and he gave up a hit, and then I had a lefty and a righty in the bullpen. So a lefty came up to hit. So I brought in the lefty, and then he got the second out, and then I brought in my righty to close it out, and I won the series, and all the players came on, and they celebrated, and then they showed the highlight of Duda hitting the go-ahead home run. Like, again, while I agree with some of what you're saying, and I want to talk a little bit more about where you could really see an improvement, I want to make sure, like, this is not, and certainly from my perspective, I'm not saying it's not good. I think it's actually good, and it's been surprising me even more with how good some of the postseason stuff has been. Now, I will say, though, that in a all-hands-on-deck elimination game, or even, if you're down 2-1 in a best-of-5 or down, 3-1 or, 3-2 in a best-of-7, the managers, it is all hands on deck. I mean, Madison Bumgarner in the World Series last year, Randy Johnson a bunch of years ago, a day after pitching coming out of the bullpen. Well, I'm sure we'll see it again soon, in one or more of these series where the game is managed very differently. If a starter is in trouble in an elimination game, he comes out right away. And I think that's an area where it's easy to say and it's hard to do it, but they could put some sort of code in the game for, okay, this is an elimination game. The manager's going to lose his mind and do everything he can. That's, I think, certainly, at least to me, I haven't seen that happen, in that game 5, elimination game that I played, for example.
Yeah, and we were talking about pitcher fatigue and pitcher rotations and stuff, and that's the same thing. You don't see the AI starting their number one guy on 3 days rest. You don't see them bringing a starter out of the bullpen in a close game. So those are things they have to work on because there is a huge difference in how games are managed from just a regular season game to a big postseason game, or a play-in game or the wild card game. And I played I simmed the wild card games in the show, and one of them went 16 innings, but not once did a starter come out of the bullpen. And this is both teams controlled by the AI. So you definitely get that sense that they're just managing it like any other game. And that's one of the issues when you're playing the AI, at least. And then when you're playing other users, if you're playing an online franchise, you don't even get the presentation stuff, which I wanted to bring up, because they really need to add that option in. It's not even an option. They just strip all that stuff out. So we're playing in the playoffs, our game coming down the line, maybe somebody hits a home run. You don't even get a replay of it. It just moves on to the next thing. And so that kind of hurt the experience. It was still really fun when we were playing through our playoffs in our league. Yeah. I got to the World Series against TJ and everything, but then there's no presentation to it. So they really need to add that for the online franchises. And then, the AI with the managers definitely needs work so that those stand out from, because they're making the outside stuff, the crowd, the atmosphere different, but then the games have to be managed differently also.
Yep, and the umpires. We chatted about it for a moment. Let's revisit the umpires. They could use those additional umpires, and it just seems like maybe it's because a lot more people are watching, but it just seems like more weird stuff happens in the playoffs. Like in
all the replays and
MLCS, the ball just goes into the ivy, and the outfield just throws his hands up in the air. Terry Collins is coming out and he's yelling at the umpire.
Don't forget the ball off the bat, thrown in by the catcher that allows the run to score.
Now it's hard to, that randomness is difficult, but the blown call and then the challenge. Now challenges, I'll give MLB 15 the show credit. The challenges are a regular thing. Like
all they have though are the challenges at first base.
Right.
That's it.
Okay.
Safer out calls at first base. They need to add them everywhere else, especially because that becomes even a bigger deal in the playoffs because you get 2 challenges instead of 1 before the 7th inning or something like that. So you get additional challenges, and you see that being utilized in these games, even for things like, hey, the guy popped off the base and tagged him while he popped off the base, and you don't get that kind of stuff in the show right now.
Yeah. So I could, I definitely, I think the right field and the left field umpires is a no-brainer. If they could to get that in, that was definitely something that could add a little bit more authenticity for sure. And we talked about the fatigue and things like that. So any other themes that we want to revisit in both the listener feedback and in, your own personal thoughts on?
Well, the other big one is commentary, which we touched on a little bit before, but in that 16-inning wild card game, it sounded like they were just calling a regular game again. It was, okay, we're going to the 14th. This game is long. We're going to the 14th or on to the 15th. They did not define the game as a one-off game. They did not define it as one team's going home, one team's going ahead in the playoffs here. But the commentary as a whole, as we've discussed, and it's been almost a decade that I've been hearing people say, we need new commentary. We need a whole new commentary team. We're just tired of it. It's not that the commentary is bad. We've just been hearing the same guys for 10 years or whatever it may be. And for people who play the game a ton, just think how many hours you've listened to the same commentary.
It's funny, though, because as we've talked about, commentary really is not that important to me. The way that I play my sports games, I don't focus on the commentary. I don't really focus that much. Now, in certain situations, I do like the game that I played. Yeah. I think you're probably splicing some of the video in, that playoff game that I played. I was sitting on the couch playing the game. This was game 5 of the of a division series with the team that I've played 162 games with. So I was focused on it, but I play a lot of football, baseball, basketball, on the treadmill or while I'm listening to other stuff and things. So, I don't want to be, I don't want to complain about something that I don't really care that much about, but would definitely be nice if, because when you're watching these games on TBS, when you're watching these games on Fox, every play means more. Every, in the first inning, the third inning, it's got a different feel, and you feel it in the announcers. They talk with more urgency. They react bigger and better, and not in a fake way. They're as excited and invested in this as anybody else. So I definitely agree that while I think that the fans give the commentary a little bit too much when it comes to the playoffs, a little too much, heat or cynicism, because they do have some pretty interesting commentary. It definitely lacks that raised level of intensity. That's definitely lacking. I agree with you there, and I think that's pretty much uniform across all sports games.
Yeah, that's probably true to an extent. But with baseball, as far as commentary goes, you're hearing it more. You're pausing in between pitches. You're pausing in between innings. Whereas, with a football game, you're more constantly thinking, okay, what plays on it? You kind of tune that stuff out naturally, I think. Yep. And in baseball, just like when you're watching a baseball game too, I think you listen to it more.
I agree.
And so that comes in, and it's also 45 minutes to an hour long game. Yeah. So it's going to wear on you, but then you want the emotion to come out too from the announcers, and you don't get that. It's like you've got Joe Buck in there constantly calling your games, because it's just monotone, it's flat, it's predictable, and that's really what we want out of games the most is unpredictability, right? And you said it's tough to program that stuff in. It is, as far as the game goes. It is. But you got to have, I think, that in the commentary team too, and that's a difficult thing to do. The closest is probably NBA 2K as far as the height of commentary right now, and the show just hasn't. They haven't really tried. I think that's what bothers people the most. They haven't really tried to change the commentary, or just reboot the commentary. Other series have to mixed results. People just want something new at this point, I think, and that just ties along with the playoffs, how they call the playoff games as well.
Yep. Well, MLB 15 The Show, I don't think anybody would argue that it's a fantastic game. I think they do a really good job in the postseason, but there's also some definite room for improvement as well. You and I both believe that, as clearly do the listeners. So, but you know what? If you're watching this video, give it another go, right? If it's been a little while since you played a MLB 15 The Show in a postseason mode, I think you might be a little more pleasantly surprised than you think if you go check that out.